The Andromeda Galaxy buzzed with activity as the Grand Tournament of Titans drew near. Across countless worlds, holographic billboards, neural broadcasts, and interstellar news channels blared the same message: the arena would soon be filled with the greatest warriors in the universe, battling for supremacy, riches, and the coveted wish of Zurich. The prize promised by the Triumvirate Council, a single, unchallengeable wish, had the power to change the fate of entire star systems. The arena of Zurich, a massive structure floating in the cold expanse of space, was already swarming with combatants, spectators, and merchants eager to witness the spectacle. The arena was a marvel of alien engineering, a colossal floating city of stone and metal, with rings of force fields to contain the most devastating of battles. Its towering spires and massive gates gave it the aura of a citadel from an ancient age, but inside, it pulsed with futuristic technology, augmented reality screens, and alien creatures of every shape and size. The air was thick with anticipation, the hum of conversation punctuated by the clanking of weaponry, the sizzle of plasma blades, and the distant roars of beasts caged for the bloodsport. Among the towering gladiators, cybernetic assassins, and monstrous alien creatures, one figure stood out: a young woman clad in a simple gray jumpsuit, her hair tied back into a loose ponytail. This was Mara Jackson, the unassuming human who had somehow managed to secure a place in the tournament. She stood silently by the entrance, watching the other contestants. Most of them ignored her, assuming she was a lowly technician or perhaps someone who had lost her way in the crowded halls. But Mara's eyes were sharp, taking in every detail, every weakness of the warriors who swaggered by. Mara had arrived on a dilapidated cargo freighter, slipping past the guards with forged credentials. She knew she didn't belong among these warriors, at least, not in the way they thought. Her only weapon was an old, worn combat knife strapped to her thigh, a relic from her days as a scavenger on the desolate outer colonies of Earth. The tournament registration was overseen by a hulking, four-eyed alien with cobalt blue skin and a permanent scowl. As Mara approached, he glanced up from his holopad, his many eyes widening in surprise. "Name?" he grunted, disbelief evident in his voice. "Mara Jackson," she replied calmly. The alien's brow furrowed. "A human? In the tournament?" He let out a derisive snort. "Are you aware that humans have a survival rate of less than 5% in the opening round?" Mara simply nodded, her expression unreadable. After a moment's hesitation, the alien shrugged and punched in her details. "Your funeral," he muttered, handing her a small metallic badge with her entry number, number 573. The arena's gates. The roar of the crowd was deafening as Mara stepped into the arena for her first match. The Colosseum was filled to capacity, its stands packed with creatures from every corner of the galaxy: scaled reptilians, glowing ethereals, cybernetic monstrosities, and species so bizarre they defied description. Holographic displays above the arena projected her image, magnifying her small, human figure for all to see. The audience erupted in laughter and jeers. "Fresh meat," shouted a drunken spectator. "She won't last a minute," another bellowed. Mara ignored them. She focused on her breathing, centering herself as she had learned during her years of survival on Earth's brutal frontier colonies. She knew that underestimating her would be her opponent's first mistake. Across the arena, a massive gate opened with a thunderous clang, and Mara's first opponent emerged. It was Gorlith the Crusher, a four-armed, armored brute nearly 3 meters tall. His dark, metallic exoskeleton gleamed in the artificial sunlight, and his 6 eyes glowed with a murderous light. The crowd went wild, chanting his name as he slammed his fists together, sending shockwaves through the ground. Mara's heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. Gorlith was a seasoned warrior, infamous for tearing his opponents limb from limb. She had no chance in a direct confrontation, and she knew it. Instead, she would have to rely on her agility, her wits, and that strange intuition that had saved her life so many times before. The signal to begin blared, and Gorlith charged with a roar, moving with surprising speed for his size. Mara barely had time to dodge his first strike as his massive fists slammed into the ground where she had been standing. The impact sent a cloud of dust into the air, and Mara used it to her advantage, rolling to the side and disappearing from his view. The crowd was on its feet, craning to see where the human had gone. Gorlith, infuriated by his missed strike, swung wildly in all directions. Mara, meanwhile, kept her movements fluid and unpredictable. She had learned long ago that being small could be an advantage if you used it correctly. Gorlith's heavy fists smashed through stone pillars, sending debris flying. Mara used the chaos to her advantage, darting between the falling rubble and using it as cover. She could feel the rush of adrenaline, her senses sharpening. The arena's energy seemed to pulse in her veins as if she were somehow drawing strength from the very air around her. But Mara couldn't dodge forever. Gorlith's swings were getting closer, his roars louder. He was relentless, his brute strength slowly wearing her down. She needed to end this, and fast. Mara's eyes darted around, scanning the arena for anything she could use. That's when she noticed it. One of the support beams holding up a section of the arena wall was cracked from Gorlith's earlier attack. If she could lure him into striking it. Mara darted forward, throwing a small knife at Gorlith to get his attention. The blade barely scratched his armored hide, but it was enough to enrage him. He charged again, his eyes blazing with fury. Mara turned and sprinted toward the cracked beam, her heart racing. At the last second, she dove out of the way, and Gorlith's massive fists crashed into the beam. There was a deafening crack as the weakened structure gave way. Tons of stone and metal came crashing down, burying Gorlith in an avalanche of debris. The crowd gasped, and for a moment, all was silent. Then, as the dust settled, Mara stood alone in the center of the arena. The monitors above displayed the scene, confirming what the crowd couldn't believe: the human had won. The arena erupted into cheers, boos, and stunned silence. The announcer's voice boomed over the loudspeakers. Against all odds, Mara Jackson has defeated Gorlith the Crusher. Breathing heavily, Mara looked up at the roaring crowd, her eyes scanning for any sign of approval from the triumvirate's box. But the council members remained motionless, their faces hidden behind their ornate helmets. Mara knew this victory was only the beginning. She had caught their attention. But whether that was a blessing or a curse remained to be seen. As she walked back to her quarters, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. And she was right. In the shadows of the arena, a pair of glowing red eyes tracked her every move. The echoes of the roaring crowd still lingered in Mara's ears as she returned to the dimly lit corridors beneath the arena of Zurich. Sweat dripped from her brow, and her muscles ached from the exertion of her first match, but she couldn't afford to rest. She had survived the first round, but the tournament was only going to get harder from here. Her quarters were a cramped, windowless cell deep within the labyrinth of tunnels beneath the arena. As she pushed open the heavy metal door, she half expected an ambush. She was, after all, an unwelcome anomaly in this bloodthirsty competition. But the room was empty, save for a bare cot, a small sink, and a flickering light that cast erratic shadows on the walls. Mara's mind was still racing with the memory of her fight against Gorlith. She had survived, but barely. Her victory was a combination of luck, quick reflexes, and a strange feeling that had guided her actions, a feeling she couldn't quite explain. It was as if her mind had momentarily slowed down time, allowing her to see her opponent's moves before they happened. She splashed cold water on her face and stared into the cracked mirror. "What are you getting yourself into, Mara?" she muttered to herself. She had come to the tournament for a chance to win the wish of Zurich, a chance to change everything for her people back on the desolate outer colonies of Earth. But now, she was beginning to realize that the stakes were far higher than she had imagined. A visitor in the shadows as she turned to leave her quarters, a soft sound like the whisper of metal on stone caught her attention. Instinctively, Mara reached for the knife she kept hidden in her boot. The door to her room slid shut with a hiss, plunging her into darkness. Her heart skipped a beat, but she remained silent, listening. A faint blue glow emerged from the corner of the room, and a figure stepped into view. It was an old man, his face heavily scarred, with mechanical implants grafted into his temples. His eyes were a dull, cybernetic blue that glowed faintly in the darkness. "Who the hell are you?" Mara demanded, knife at the ready. The old man raised his hands, palms open in a gesture of peace. "My name is Xenon," he said in a gravelly voice. "I mean you no harm. I came to talk." Mara didn't lower her knife. "How did you get in here? These quarters are supposed to be secure." Xenon chuckled softly. "Security systems in this place are child's play if you know where to look. But that's not important right now." His expression turned serious. "I saw your fight today, Mara Jackson. You're not like the others." Mara narrowed her eyes. "And what's that supposed to mean?" Xenon stepped closer, his cybernetic eyes flickering as he scanned her. "The way you fought, no human should have been able to move like that, predict attacks with such precision. Either you've got an implant hidden somewhere, or what?" Mara interrupted, her patience thinning. "Or you have a gift," Xenon said quietly. "A rare one. The kind that could get you killed in a place like this." Mara's grip on her knife tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb," Xenon snapped. "You think I haven't seen it before? I was a gladiator in this arena long before you were born. I've seen warriors with psionic abilities, people who can bend time, predict movements, even control the minds of others. The Council hunts them down, fears them, because they're dangerous. And you, girl, you have that power." Mara's mind raced. Psionics? She had heard stories, legends of people with mental powers beyond human comprehension, but she had always thought they were just that, legends. Yet, there was no denying the strange sensation she had experienced during her fight with Gorlith. "How do you know this?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Xenon leaned against the wall, his mechanical limbs whirring softly. "Because I had that gift once, before they took it from me." He tapped the implants on his temples. "The Triumvirate Council, they don't just sponsor this tournament for entertainment. They use it to find people like you, to identify threats to their power. If they realize what you can do, they'll either turn you into one of their mind-controlled soldiers or kill you outright." Mara's blood ran cold. "Then why are you telling me this? What do you want?" Xenon's eyes softened. "Because I want to help you. I know what it's like to be hunted for something you didn't ask for, to be forced into a life of violence just to survive. But you're different. You have a chance to win this tournament, to use that wish of Surik for something greater than wealth or power." Mara lowered her knife, but only slightly. "What's in it for you?" "I want freedom," Xenon said simply. "The Council controls my mind with these implants, forces me to act as their spy, their enforcer. But if you win, you can use your wish to free me." He paused, searching her eyes. "In exchange, I can teach you how to control your gift, how to use it, harness it. Without training, you'll never survive the later rounds." Mara was silent, her mind racing. She didn't trust Xenon, but his words resonated with a truth she couldn't deny. If she wanted to survive against the galaxy's most powerful warriors and against Varoth the Unyielding, the ruthless champion she would inevitably face, she would need every advantage she could get. "Fine," she said at last. "But if you betray me, I'll make sure your death is as painful as it is slow." Xenon grinned, revealing a row of metal teeth. "I wouldn't dream of it." The training begins. Over the next few days, Xenon trained Mara in secret, using the dimly lit storage rooms beneath the arena as their makeshift dojo. He taught her how to control her psionic abilities, how to focus her mind to slow time in moments of danger. At first, it was overwhelming trying to control the flood of information, the rush of sensations as her perception heightened. But with Xenon's guidance, Mara began to unlock parts of her mind she had never known existed. Feel the rhythm of your opponent's movements, Xenon instructed one night as Mara sparred against a holographic training dummy. Don't think, feel. Let your mind predict where they'll strike. Mara's movements became faster, more fluid. She could sense the dummy's attacks a split second before they came, dodging and countering with precise strikes. For the first time, she felt in control, like she was tapping into something greater than herself. But the true test was yet to come. As the next round of the tournament approached, Mara couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were constantly on her. The Triumvirate Council was watching, and now, with Xenon's warning ringing in her ears, she realized that she was playing a far more dangerous game than she had ever anticipated. When the day of her next match arrived, Mara stood at the entrance to the arena once more. This time, she was prepared not just physically, but mentally. She could feel the psionic energy coursing through her veins, ready to be unleashed. The doors opened, and she stepped into the arena, where her next opponent awaited. This time, she would not just survive, she would dominate. The real tournament had just begun. The massive gates of the arena groaned open, releasing a blinding flood of artificial sunlight. The crowd roared in anticipation as Mara Jackson stepped into the circular battlefield, her heart pounding in her chest. The cheers, jeers, and raucous laughter from the stands were deafening. This was it, the semifinal round. She was just one victory away from facing the tournament's reigning champion, Varoth the Unyielding. The ground beneath her boots was scorched black from past battles, littered with the remnants of broken weapons and dried bloodstains from those who had fallen before her. Mara inhaled deeply, steadying herself. She had made it this far, surviving on her wits, her psionic gift, and the hard-won training Xenon had given her. But she knew that today would be her greatest challenge yet. A voice boomed over the loudspeakers, amplified to reach every corner of the colossal arena. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all species. The time has come for the penultimate match of the Tournament of Titans. Facing off today are two warriors who have defied the odds, survived the bloodbath, and proven their worth. In one corner, the human newcomer, Mara Jackson, the girl who defied the Crusher. And in the other dash, the announcer's voice dropped to a menacing whisper, Zarthan the Vortex, Master of the Void. A hush fell over the crowd as the opposite gate rumbled open. From the darkness emerged Zarthan, a towering figure clad in an obsidian black suit that seemed to absorb the very light around him. His eyes were two pits of darkness, flickering with a sickly green glow. Zarthan was a psionic nullifier, a rare being who could warp reality around him, bending the laws of physics to his will. Mara's stomach clenched. This wasn't just a fight against brute strength, this was a battle of minds. She knew from Xenon's teachings that psionic nullifiers were incredibly dangerous, capable of disrupting the abilities of others and turning the battlefield into a twisted nightmare. Stay calm, she whispered to herself. She had been preparing for this. Xenon's voice echoed in her mind, your gift is powerful, but only if you control it. Don't let fear cloud your focus. The battle begins. The arena's force fields activated, sealing them inside a shimmering dome. The air crackled with tension as the countdown began. 3, 2, 1. Fight! Zarthan wasted no time. He raised his arms, and the very air around him seemed to warp and twist. Mara could feel the pressure in her head increase, like a vice tightening around her skull. The ground beneath her feet rippled as if it were made of liquid, and shadows seemed to dance in the corners of her vision. Mara staggered, struggling to maintain her focus. He's trying to disrupt my mind, she realized. She closed her eyes, forcing herself to breathe steadily, reaching deep into the reserves of her psionic abilities. She had learned to slow time in moments of crisis, to perceive the world in fractions of a second. Now, she would need to push beyond that. When she opened her eyes, everything seemed to move in slow motion. Zarthan's energy waves rippled toward her like dark tendrils, but she could see gaps between them, tiny windows of opportunity where she could maneuver. Drawing on every ounce of her training, Mara dodged the tendrils, darting and weaving like a shadow. She was fast, But Zarthan's powers were relentless, the space around him bending like the surface of a black hole. Every time she got close, he pushed her back with a wave of psionic force, sending her skidding across the scorched earth. "Is that all you've got, human?" Zarthan taunted, his voice echoing unnaturally through the arena. He lifted a hand, and the air around Mara thickened, becoming almost solid. She felt herself being dragged toward him as if by an invisible current. "Think, Mara, think." She screamed inwardly. She couldn't match his raw power, but she didn't need to. If she could disrupt his concentration, she might find an opening. With a flick of her wrist, Mara hurled a small metallic disc she had hidden in her sleeve. It wasn't a weapon, just a decoy laced with a flash grenade. As it clattered at Zarthan's feet, she triggered it with a thought. The grenade erupted in a blinding flash of light. Zarthan staggered, his psionic grip faltering for a split second. That was all Mara needed. She dashed forward, channeling her psionic energy into her fists. She moved like a blur, launching herself at him with a speed that defied physics. Her first strike landed squarely on Zarthan's chest, the force of it amplified by her gift. She could feel his armor buckle under the impact. But before she could press her advantage, Zarthan roared in rage, his nullifying field expanding in a violent shockwave. Mara was thrown backward, crashing into the ground. A battle of minds. Breathing heavily, Mara struggled to her feet. Her vision blurred, and her ears rang. Zarthan's powers were more potent than she had anticipated. His ability to warp reality was pushing her to her limits. But then, something clicked in her mind, an idea that Xenon had drilled into her during their training sessions. "Your psionic powers don't just allow you to perceive time differently, Mara," Xenon had said. "They can disrupt your opponent's mind too, if you learn to focus." Mara closed her eyes again, reaching out with her mind. She had never tried this before in the heat of battle, but she had no choice. She could feel the chaotic energy emanating from Zarthan like a storm, his mind a swirling vortex of rage and malice. Taking a deep breath, she reached into that storm, probing for weaknesses. At first, Zarthan seemed unaware of her mental intrusion. But as Mara pushed deeper, she sensed a flicker of fear beneath his bravado. She latched onto it, amplifying that fear, distorting his perception of reality just as he had done to her. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Zarthan stumbled, his control over the battlefield wavering. "Get out of my head!" Zarthan bellowed, his voice a mixture of fury and panic. Mara didn't let up. She focused all her psionic energy into a single mental strike, targeting the core of Zarthan's mind. With a scream, he fell to his knees, clutching his head. The void around him collapsed, the warped reality flickering back to normal. Seizing her chance, Mara sprinted forward, her knife flashing in her hand. Before Zarthan could recover, she drove the blade into the exposed joint of his armor, piercing through to the soft flesh beneath. Zarthan let out a strangled cry, his body convulsing as his powers imploded. For a moment, the arena was dead silent. Then the crowd erupted into wild cheers, their disbelief turning into frenzied admiration. Mara stood over her fallen opponent, panting heavily. The holographic displays above the arena confirmed what everyone had just witnessed. Mara Jackson had defeated Zarthan the Vortex. But as the cheers washed over her, Mara felt a chill run down her spine. She knew that this victory was not the end, it was only a prelude to the final challenge. Facing the unbeatable champion. As Mara exited the arena, her mind was already racing ahead to the next fight. Varoth the Unyielding awaited her in the final match. He was more than just a champion, he was a legend, a monstrous force that had crushed every opponent without breaking a sweat. But that wasn't what worried Mara. As she reached her quarters, a small drone buzzed in, delivering a message from Xenon. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing his grim face. "Mara," Xenon said, his voice filled with urgency, "I've found out something about Varoth. He's not just a fighter. The Council, they've done something to him. You're not just fighting a champion, you're going up against their most dangerous weapon. Mara's blood turned to ice. The final match would. The anticipation was electric as Mara Jackson walked through the dimly lit corridors leading to the final arena. The weight of a galaxy's expectations bore down on her shoulders. As she passed through the reinforced doors, the familiar roar of the crowd greeted her, louder than ever before. Every seat in the colossal arena of Surik was filled, and hundreds of millions more watched from across the galaxy via holographic broadcasts. Today was the day she would face Varoth the Unyielding, the undefeated champion who had dominated the tournament for decades. But this match was more than just a fight. It was a test, a crucible that would decide the fate of not just Mara, but of everyone who had ever dared to hope for change against the iron grip of the Triumvirate Council. The words of Xenon's warning still echoed in her mind. Varoth is more than just a warrior. He's been augmented, twisted by the Council's experiments. They've turned him into their ultimate weapon. Mara's hands clenched into fists as she reached the final gate. The stakes were clear: defeat Varoth or die trying. But she was no longer the same frightened girl who had stumbled into the tournament. She was a warrior now honed, sharpened, and ready for whatever came next. The champion's entrance, the arena's force fields crackled to life, trapping her inside the massive battleground. Across the field, the ground trembled as Varoth's gate opened with a thunderous crash. The crowd fell silent, holding its collective breath as the legend himself emerged. Varoth was a towering figure, a monstrous amalgamation of flesh, metal, and psionic enhancements. His crimson eyes glowed like hot coals, and his armored frame glistened under the arena lights, exuding an aura of raw power that seemed to bend the air around him. Thick cables snaked from his back, pulsing with energy that crackled ominously. For the first time, Mara saw what Xenon had meant. This was not a mere gladiator. Varoth had been turned into a living weapon, a puppet of the Council. His enhancements were not just for physical strength, they were designed to crush the mind and spirit of anyone who stood before him. The announcer's voice boomed, "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all kinds. The moment you've all been waiting for. The human challenger, Mara Jackson, faces the undefeated champion, Varoth the Unyielding. Let the final battle begin." A shrill horn signaled the start, and Varoth was already charging, moving with impossible speed for a being of his size. Mara barely had time to react, her psionic senses flaring to life. She dodged to the side, feeling the rush of air as Varoth's massive fist slammed into the ground where she had just been standing. The impact sent a shockwave through the arena, causing debris to fly. He's fast, she thought, her mind racing. But she couldn't afford to let fear creep in. She had faced the impossible before, and she would do it again. The battle unfolds. The fight became a deadly dance of speed and brutality. Varoth was relentless, his attacks a blur of metal and energy. Every swing of his fists sent arcs of crackling energy that threatened to tear Mara apart. She used her psionic gift to perceive time in fractions of a second, weaving and dodging his blows by the narrowest of margins. But it was clear that Varoth was toying with her. Every time she tried to counterattack, he blocked her effortlessly, his cybernetic implants predicting her moves with uncanny precision. Mara could feel her strength waning. She needed a plan, and she needed it fast. As she dodged another bone-crushing blow, her mind flashed back to Xenon's advice: "Your psionic powers aren't just for slowing time, Mara. You can disrupt the implants in his mind if you focus hard enough. But to do that, you need to get close." Getting close to Varoth seemed like a death sentence, but it was her only chance. Gathering her courage, she sprinted towards him, zigzagging to avoid his energy blasts. At the last second, she launched herself into the air, aiming for the exposed cables at his back. But Varoth was ready. He spun around with lightning speed, catching her mid-air by the throat. The crowd gasped as he lifted her off the ground, squeezing with a force that made her vision blur. "Pathetic human," Varoth growled, his voice a low rumble that resonated through the arena. "You think you can defeat me? You're nothing." As darkness closed in around her, Mara summoned the last of her strength. She reached out with her mind, channeling every ounce of psionic energy she had left. She pushed through the pain, focusing on the cybernetic implants in Veritha's skull. For a moment, she felt a flicker of connection, a sense of the alien machinery fused with his brain. With a scream of defiance, she unleashed a mental blast, pouring all her willpower into disrupting Veritha's neural link. His eyes widened, and for the first time, Mara saw something she had never thought possible: confusion, even fear. Veritha's grip loosened, and Mara dropped to the ground, gasping for air. She could see sparks flying from the implants in his skull. He staggered, roaring in fury as his systems began to malfunction. The crowd was on its feet, watching in stunned silence. But Mara knew it wasn't over. Veritha's enhancements were powerful, but they were also his weakness. She had to strike now, while he was disoriented. The final strike. Ignoring the searing pain in her limbs, Mara sprinted forward. She focused her mind again, this time aiming for a critical point she had noticed earlier, a small, exposed panel near the base of Veritha's neck. If she could disable that, she might be able to shut down his psionic enhancements entirely. As Varoth thrashed, trying to regain control, Mara leaped onto his back. Using her knife, she pried open the panel, exposing a nest of wires. With a surge of psionic energy, she jammed her knife into the circuitry, sending a powerful mental pulse through his system. Varoth let out a monstrous scream, the sound echoing through the arena like a dying beast. His cybernetic limbs spasmed, and his eyes flickered, the red glow dimming to black. With one final roar, he collapsed to his knees, then fell face-first onto the ground, the arena trembling with the impact. The crowd erupted into chaos cheers, screams, and gasps of disbelief. The invincible Varoth had fallen. Mara Jackson, the human underdog, had defeated the galaxy's greatest champion. The Council's response. As Mara stood over Veritha's lifeless form, the celebration was abruptly cut short. The massive holographic screens above the arena flickered to life, revealing the cold, masked faces of the triumvirate council. The head counselor, General Vorka, leaned forward, his voice a low growl. Mara Jackson, you have won the tournament, but you have disrupted our plans and exposed our secrets. The wish of Surik is yours to claim, but it comes at a cost. What is your desire? Mara didn't hesitate. Free Xenon, she declared, her voice ringing out clear and strong. Release him from the control of your implants. The crowd murmured in surprise. This was not the wish they had expected. Vorka's eyes narrowed, but Mara continued before he could respond. And in exchange, I won't reveal the data I've collected on your illegal experiments and mind control. The galaxy is watching, and if you refuse, they'll know everything. The counselors exchanged tense glances. After a long, agonizing pause, Vorka nodded. Very well, he said through gritted teeth. Your wish is granted. The restraints on Xenon's mind were lifted, and he appeared in the stands, free for the first time in decades. The crowd erupted into cheers, their voices a thunderous wave that shook the arena. A new beginning. As Mara and Xenon exited the arena together, the air was filled with the scent of freedom and possibility. The triumvirate's grip on the galaxy had been shaken, and Mara knew it was only a matter of time before others rose up to challenge their rule. Thank you, Xenon said quietly, his eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and awe. You've done more than just win a tournament today. You've sparked a revolution. Mara looked up at the stars beyond the arena's dome, a faint smile playing on her lips. This is just the beginning, she said. The galaxy is changing, and it's about time someone stood up to the council. The two of them walked into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges the universe had in store. For Mara Jackson, the simple human who had dared to challenge the galaxy's mightiest warriors, this was only the start of a new journey, one that would change the fate of the galaxy forever. The end. Or the dawn of a new era.